The mansion stood tall and intimidating at the edge of the hill, its marble pillars and crystal chandeliers casting an air of perfection that outsiders could only dream of entering. Inside, servants hurried back and forth, polishing, dusting, and preparing for the grand wedding that would take place in only 3 days. The millionaire, Alexander Grant, was not just wealthy, he was a man whose every move was whispered about in society. He had chosen Amelia, a stunning heiress, to be his bride, and the marriage was being called the Union of Dynasties. Among the maids who worked in the mansion was Elena, a quiet young woman with kind eyes and worn hands. She had taken the job not long ago, desperate for income after her father's passing left her family drowning in debt. Though the other staff mostly ignored her, she performed her duties with a quiet grace that never went unnoticed by the house itself, the way one notices the soft ticking of a clock. On the morning the jewelers delivered the custom-made wedding ring, an enormous diamond set in platinum that seemed to capture the light of the sun itself, Elena was dusting the shelves nearby. She saw the velvet box resting on the polished oak table, and though she tried to avert her eyes, the diamond glimmered with a hypnotic brilliance. She had never even held a piece of jewelry worth more than a few dollars, yet here was a treasure worth a fortune, destined for a woman who already had everything. The butler, a stern man with thinning gray hair, entered the hall and, in a rare display of carelessness, bumped the edge of the table. The box toppled, falling open, and the ring rolled across the polished floor, spinning until it landed against Elena's shoe. Her heart jumped into her throat as she stooped to pick it up, the weight of it pressing against her palm as though it carried not just wealth, but fate itself. Just then, Alexander entered the room, his sharp eyes landing on her. The room fell silent. A maid, holding his wedding ring. Gasps rippled from the servants in the hall, whispers already forming in the corners. Elena's face burned with shame as she stammered, It fell. I was only, but her words dissolved under the intensity of his gaze. Alexander's jaw clenched, his voice cold as ice. What do you think you are doing with my ring? His words cut through her like a blade, and the silence of the mansion seemed to tighten like a noose around her. Elena's knees almost buckled under the weight of his accusation, her fingers trembling as she extended the ring back to him. Please, sir, she whispered, it rolled to me. I swear I didn't mean, but Alexander didn't take it immediately. Instead, his eyes lingered on her, as though searching for something beyond her trembling form. The staff around them shifted uncomfortably, some smirking, others fearful that this small act of misfortune might cost the maid her position, or worse. Amelia, the bride-to-be, entered just as Elena tried to explain herself. She was radiant in a silken dress, her smile delicate but her eyes sharp, like glass ready to cut. What is this? She asked, her voice smooth but filled with disdain. Why is she touching my ring? Elena's cheeks flushed red, and she lowered her head. It was an accident, ma'am. I only wanted to return it. Amelia's lips curled in a mocking smile. Accidents happen when clumsy hands touch what they shouldn't. Alexander, you mustn't allow your staff to think they can play with such things. The words were dripping with poison, yet Alexander remained silent, staring at Elena with a strange intensity that confused everyone in the room. Finally, he reached out and plucked the ring from her hand, but instead of dismissing her, he spoke in a low voice. Where did you learn to handle something so delicately? His question startled her, and she looked up, confused. I don't know, sir. I was only careful. Amelia's expression hardened, jealousy flashing in her eyes at the way his attention lingered on the maid. She forced a laugh. Alexander, really, she's just a servant. Let her be dismissed so we can focus on our celebration. The staff murmured among themselves, shocked at her suggestion. But Alexander's voice rose with quiet authority. She will not be dismissed. The words rang like a hammer strike, silencing Amelia, stunning the staff, and leaving Elena speechless. The maid clutched her apron, feeling the air thicken around her as she realized something had just shifted in the mansion. A single moment that would change everything. That evening, the mansion buzzed with gossip. Maids whispered in corners, speculating why Alexander had defended Elena so firmly. Some said he only wanted to avoid scandal, others claimed they saw something in his eyes, something far deeper than mere authority. Elena, however, locked herself in her small attic room, her heart pounding as if it might tear through her chest. She replayed the moment over and over, the chill of his words, the heat of his gaze, the ring's brilliance heavy in her memory. "Why me?" she whispered to the darkness. Downstairs, Alexander stood alone in his study, the ring on the table before him. His hand hovered above it, remembering the way Alina's fingers had held it, not greedily, not with entitlement, but with a strange reverence, as though she understood its weight not as jewelry, but as a burden. For the first time in years, he felt something stir in his chest, something unfamiliar yet undeniable. Amelia, however, was not blind. She stormed into the study, her anger veiled by a saccharine smile. "Darling, I don't understand why you allow that girl to stay. She's beneath us. She embarrassed you." Alexander's gaze lifted slowly, his tone sharp. "She embarrassed no one. It was an accident." Amelia scoffed. "Accidents don't happen to me, Alexander. Not in my mansion, not with my ring." He frowned. "This mansion isn't yours yet." The venom in her glare nearly pierced him, but he no longer flinched. As the night wore on, Amelia plotted ways to remove Elena from the mansion quietly, determined to erase what she perceived as a threat. But fate had other plans. Later that night, while Elena carried linens through the hallway, Alexander intercepted her. His voice softened, different from the icy tone earlier. "You looked frightened today," he said. She froze, unsure how to answer. "I didn't mean to. I would never steal," she whispered. He studied her for a long moment before replying, "I know." Her breath caught in her throat at those two simple words. For the first time, someone believed her. And though she didn't know it yet, this fragile thread of trust would weave itself into a bond neither of them could escape. The days leading to the wedding grew heavy with tension. Preparations continued, but the mansion felt unsettled, as though its very walls sensed the storm brewing inside. Elena kept her head down, but she could not escape the stares, the curious, envious, and hostile glares from the other staff. Amelia's disdain grew sharper by the hour, her jealousy thinly disguised beneath her perfect smile. One afternoon, Elena was ordered to polish the ballroom floor. As she worked on her knees, scrubbing until her hands ached, Amelia appeared, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown to doom. She crouched beside Elena, her voice low and venomous. "Do not mistake Alexander's kindness for affection. Men like him do not belong to girls like you. You're a servant, and servants stay in the shadows." Elena swallowed her words, her chest burning with silent pain. She wanted to shout, to defend her dignity, but she remained quiet, unwilling to stir further trouble. What neither of them realized was that Alexander had entered through the side door, hearing every word. His expression hardened as he stepped forward. "Amelia," he said sharply, "you speak as though wealth gives you value. But dignity isn't bought." Amelia's face paled, then reddened with fury. "You're defending her again. In front of me." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I am defending what's right." Elena's eyes widened, her heart racing as she stared at the man she had once feared. In that moment, she saw something different in him, not the cold millionaire, but a man burdened by expectations, longing for truth. Amelia's rage boiled over. "If you choose to humiliate me over a maid, then perhaps you don't deserve me." She stormed away, her dress swirling like a storm cloud. The silence left behind was thick, broken only by Alexander's steady breath. He looked at Elena and, for the first time, his voice faltered. "When you held the ring that day, I realized I was about to marry the wrong woman." Elena gasped, her hands trembling as the truth hung in the air like lightning ready to strike. The wedding day dawned, but the mansion was no longer a place of celebration. Rumors had already spread through the staff and among the guests. Amelia was seen pacing in her chambers, her fury uncontained, while Alexander seemed distant, lost in thought. Elena tried to avoid the chaos, retreating to her duties, but her heart was heavy. She knew something had changed between them, something she couldn't control. As the grand ceremony began, the guests filled the ballroom, chandeliers glowing like captured stars. Alexander stood at the altar, the ring in his hand. Amelia approached in her lavish gown, radiant yet seething beneath her painted smile. But as the vows began, Alexander's chest tightened. His eyes scanned the room, searching, until they found Elena at the edge of the hall, holding a tray with trembling hands. The sight of her, simple, unadorned, yet filled with quiet strength, shook him to his core. When the moment came to place the ring on Amelia's finger, his hand froze. Gasps filled the air as he lowered the ring, his voice firm yet breaking. "I cannot do this." Amelia's face twisted in horror. "What do you mean you cannot?" Alexander turned to the guests, his voice carrying through the hall. "This marriage is built on wealth, not love. The truth is, I felt more honesty in the way a maid held this ring than I have in all my time with Amelia." The mansion erupted in chaos, guests whispering, Amelia screaming, the staff frozen in disbelief. Alexander walked away from the altar, toward Elena, whose eyes brimmed with tears. "You showed me what sincerity looks like," he said softly, his voice trembling. "And I can't marry anyone else." Elena shook her head, overwhelmed. "But I'm only a maid." He smiled faintly, his eyes gentle. "You are the only one who saw me. Not my wealth, not my status. Just me." The ring, still gleaming in his hand, no longer symbolized a contract of power but a chance at love. And though the mansion shook with scandal, Alexander's choice carved a path toward a truth no fortune could buy. The maid had held the millionaire's wedding ring, and in doing so, she had also held his heart.